Good day. Welcome to another edition of Ebima Mungo's Perspective on Global Affairs. Before I continue, I urge you to please press the like button. And if you're new to my show, I also urge you to subscribe. There's a lot of talk about peace in Ukraine. Peace in Ukraine is now the focal point of discussion in America, in Russia, and Ukraine, obviously, and in Europe. Some want this peace desperately, and some don't. And you would think that the person who wants it was the country that probably started this war, and that is America. President Trump really wants this peace process to come to such a finality or to a point where he can claim that that will be the ninth war he has stopped. So President Trump has a big interest in stopping this war. Ukraine, we really don't know. There's ambivalence. We don't know if Ukraine wants this war stopped or if Ukraine wants this war to continue. Whatever their reasons are, whatever it is that Ukraine believes they can get out of this war. As at this moment, most times we hear Ukrainian leaders, Zelensky, say they want maximum damage, harm to the economy of Russia. They want sanctions. They don't talk much about gaining back the part they've lost militarily. They want it, though. He always says that he wants the lands of Ukraine back to the 1991 borders. He says that, but he realizes that he cannot achieve that particular outcome at this point in time. So what he always advocates is that more sanctions should be placed on Ukraine and Russia. As regards to the Europeans, we know they don't want this war to stop. For their own different reasons, the Baltic countries don't want this war to stop because they feel that that will mean that Russia will definitely start to pay attention to their borders. The globalists in Britain, France, and Germany, and definitely also in Poland, they don't want this war to stop. They want that war to be carrying on, Russia to be engaged while they build their own military forces. So we are at this point where peace is being forced on Ukraine. You will get the sense that it's being forced on Ukraine. Why do I say this? There's suddenly a change in the rhetoric, in the language of the Ukrainian leadership, because there's a catfish, and that catfish amongst them, or let me say, there's a fox in the chicken coop, and that is criminal investigation against many members of the administration. This criminal investigation obviously has been started by the Americans. We know that the Americans are the ones who are giving impetus to the anti-corruption institutions in Ukraine. Their acronyms are NABU and SAPU. So suddenly we hear that Ukraine wants a dignified peace. We are beginning to hear the kind of peace that Ukraine wants, where they are qualifying their kind of peace, a just peace. Generally, the talk of peace is beginning to be more within international discourse, geopolitical discourse. And today, by tomorrow, obviously, we'll get to know more about it. The Secretary of the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine is heading a delegation to the United States. His name is Rustem Umerov. He was a former defense minister. He obviously may be in America now. In fact, President Zelensky has said that he's in America now. And this is coming following the meetings they have had in Geneva. That first meeting led then by President Zelensky's now disgraced and now resigned and now consigned to history former head of administration, Andriy Yermak. Umerov is now leading this team, and it is expected that he will start to negotiate a dignified peace for the Ukrainians. Zelensky says that the United States is demonstrating constructive approach. Nobody can accuse Zelensky of not having very flowery way. After all, he was an actor. He may have been a comedian, but you know he's a creative. He's a creative. So he knows how to put words together. And Zelensky is saying that it's coming to this conclusion, whether forced, whether sincerely, but he does believe that the Americans are listening to their own point of view. And in a speech he made, he does this video events every night to the Ukrainian people. This is what he said. He said the Ukrainian delegation should already be in the United States this evening, U.S. time. The dialogue based on the Geneva points Geneva points will continue. The American side is demonstrating a constructive approach, and in the coming days, it is feasible to flesh out the steps to determine how to bring the war to a dignified end. The Ukrainian delegation has the necessary directive, and I expect the guys to work in accordance with the Ukrainian priorities. If it is what I think, the Ukrainian priorities we know will be that one, they're not going to concede any part of the land they've lost to the Russians, which are the territories in the Donbass, Luhansk, Donetsk, Kherson, and Zaporozhye. They continue to say they won't do that. The second one that is a no-go or a red line for the Ukrainians, as we know, is that they will insist that they're going to join NATO. And the third one is that they will maintain their military somewhere in the region of 800,000 troops. This talk of peace and the fact that the Europeans have been very strong supporters of Ukraine, we are seeing the Europeans now, they are less fervent in their support in the effusive way by which they were following on with Ukraine in recent times, because as it turns out, the Americans and the Ukrainians and the Russians have just frozen out the Europeans from every discussion. The Russians and the Americans particularly have been having these discussions with Witkov and Dmitriev. They've just been discussing and there's no European on the table. Europe is not part of any discussion. They're not important. They can continue to say all they want to say, Kaya Kallas and Ursula von der Leyen and Merz and Macron. They are just not part of this particular round of discussions. But Macron is trying to make sure that he tells Zelensky, gives him the moral support to know that the support is drive towards a dignified peace. When you hear words like dignified peace, you get a sense that the Ukrainians are at that point where they are being forced to capitulate, to surrender. Underlined, dignified. But how can you get a dignified peace in a war that you are losing, a war you have lost, and a war you have no chance, no hope, or no ability to win? And one that so much has been thrown at the Russians, but they bounced back and have become stronger, to the point where even the Europeans have chosen to stay far away. They can say anything they want, send you arms, but they will never send their own soldiers to be on ground, because when they see what the hypersonic missiles are doing to Ukrainians, what the drones are doing to Ukrainian cities, Ukrainian infrastructure, and Ukrainian people, they get an understanding, especially as the Russians are not using even the weapon systems that they showed once and never used again. That's the Oreshnik. That was a thunderbolt. It was a thunderbolt. It was frightening. The whole, and there's no answer to it because it's a hypersonic. So one person who believes that Ukraine will get something anyway, because he was in Moscow recently. He was in Moscow yesterday, and his name is Viktor Orban, the Prime Minister of Hungary. He may have gone to go and have bilaterals with Putin, but he did go as an emissary of President Trump, because he will ultimately mention this. They have good relationship, him and President Trump, and he also is the only bridge between President Putin and President Trump outside of the Witkoff pathway. So Hungary went to the Hungarian prime minister went to meet Putin, and he came out with a statement that he believes that NATO and Russia should agree on the size and equipment to limit Ukrainian forces that could operate in a buffer zone. He has said that Ukraine should be a buffer zone. That had always been the conjecture of the Russians. In fact, many people may not know this, but the original Ukrainian constitution that constituted the creation of Ukraine, that came into being during the creation of Ukraine, stated that there will be a neutral country. It was until the Maidan Revolution that that particular provision of their constitution was changed. So now Orban is saying that they should be a neutral country between the Western Alliance countries of NATO and European Union and Russia, which is what the Russians want. They don't want NATO right by their border. So this is a season of peace, talk of peace everywhere. And we're getting to hear that while this peace is going on, President Trump and President Putin are making their own plans to improve bilateral relationship. There's been this visit by Dan Driscoll to Abu Dhabi. He had discussions with the Russians, but it turned out that that discussion with the Russians, we got to learn later on, had nothing to do with the Ukraine war. President Trump has for several years stated that Russia and America have an imperative to have good relationships because of their borders in the Arctic, because of the fact that they are the two largest custodian of the two largest arsenals of weapons of mass destruction in the form of nuclear warheads. There's also a lot of trade and that could be done, and cooperation. We should remember that even today, yesterday, or a few days ago, maybe 2-3 days ago, Russian astronauts and American astronauts used the same vehicle, a Soyuz spacecraft, to go to the International Space Station. There's still cooperation going on between Russia and America. They just want to deepen it. They want to deepen it so that they can have cooperation to the point where they could also be going to possibly to Mars together. They also want to explore cooperatively to the Arctic, because President Trump has come to realize that in terms of superior technology that can help the exploration of the Arctic, it's the Russians that hold the cards, because they have the world's largest fleet of nuclear icebreakers. They break the 3-meter ice slabs of the Arctic. They break it with ease and create a pathway. Now the Northern Sea route, or the Northern Sea corridor, is now the route by which they transport. They have opened a corridor by which the Chinese and even the Russians are expanding trade. That is a place, and that is one technology that the Americans will want to have an improvement. The Americans will probably want this because they know it may not just be in their interest to make Russia and China adversaries in the Arctic, because they don't have the infrastructure to be able to fight them there. And maybe that is why President Trump is so intent on taking Greenland. Anyway, we got to hear from the Wall Street Journal of all places that Trump and America and Russia have agreed to collectively weaken Europe. When you see a report like this, you should take it with a very, very big tablespoon of salt, because we really don't know. We know, for one thing, that the legacy media is not sold on peace process in Ukraine. They want war. The legacy media has never been a lover of the Russians, whether they are stationed in London, New York, Washington, or Germany. So the talk of better relationship between Europe and between America and Russia is seen in one light by the Washington Wall Street Journal, and it is seen in the light as an attempt to weaken Europe. Already, Trump has had no hand in it. Biden, their big ally, transatlantic globalist, was the one who oversaw the destruction and weakening of Europe. Very ironic, but that's how I see it. Because it was under him that we get to learn that the Nord Stream pipeline was blown. There's a lot of talk of who may have blown it. We are hearing now that it's Ukrainians, it's the CIA. Simon Hedge had said that it was the Americans. We don't know. But what we know is that that's very big, important arterial source of gas, Russian cheap, I should underline the word, cheap Russian gas, very important to Germany's industrial competitiveness. It was blown up. Now they have to buy liquefied natural gas from where I reside here in Texas, America. They are building new, huge LNG plants so that they can meet up the capacity in Europe. It will always be more expensive than piped gas from Russia. So nobody has undermined Europe more than Biden administration. But this Wall Street Journal report says that according to the Western intelligence agencies for Kremlin, the negotiation in Miami became the culmination of strategy aimed at convincing U.S. administration not to view Russia as a military threat, but a country of great opportunities. So Russia is selling itself. Russia has been doing very well in marketing itself. I can tell you that they are opening up, expanding relationship with India, with South Africa, with Saudi Arabia. The list is endless. They have one thing or the other to sell. If they're not selling you a nuclear plant, they're selling you more wheat, they're selling you more aluminum, they have a whole suite of things to sell outside oil and gas. But in the case of the relationship with America, Wall Street Journal says Moscow can redistribute the economic map of Europe while driving the wedge between America and traditional allies. They said that the main point is that they're exploring rare earth mining and energy deals, including reviving sabotage Nord Stream pipeline and offering gas concessions to the Sea of Horrocks plus other 4 sites. Russia also highlights untapped rare earth opportunities near Norilsk nickel mines and up to 6 Siberian locations. Rare earth metals are being sought desperately by America. They are signing deals all over. If you just, as a president of your country, say we have rare earth here, you'll have the American delegation arriving in your country the next 2 days. They will come with a whole suite of geological teams because rare earth is very critical to their military industrial complex. We know that they are important to the automotive industry, especially the electric energy industry, cars, but America is not a leader in that particular space. It is so that they can be able to have magnets for their F-35 program, for their F-16, for their Patriot missiles. And what just happened to them is that China has put a massive cap and limitation on their ability to manufacture this. Arms manufacturing and space manufacturing, aviation manufacturing is still the preeminent domain of the Americans. And when one very important component of their value chain and supply chain is affected, the rare earth metals, they now have to scramble. They scramble. So this rare earth metal is what the Russians are putting forward to them. Another thing too is what the Russians are getting in return. As we get to here, there's a lot of information flying all around. United States is to recognize Russian control of Crimea. This is said by the Telegraph of London. Already we know Trump on many points have always said it. In fact, Witkoff had said it, that Crimea is gone. He believes that Obama should have done something when Crimea was taken by the little green men, the men in green, men suspected to be Russians in 2014. Obama should have taken a strong position. Obama did take a position, though, very, very one that had sanctions on it. That was the sanctions that changed the world. The sanctions Obama placed on Russia actually can be said to be the sanctions that changed the world. I should congratulate myself for that insight. Because what happened was that with those sanctions, effectively, the Russians looked straight to the Chinese, and they went to and started the negotiations for the Power of Siberia 1 pipeline. That is this Power of Siberia 1 pipeline that has now reached full capacity, 40 billion cubic feet of gas being piped down to the Chinese. Already we are talking about the Power of Siberia 2. So this is what the Russians are getting for their relationship with Europe. And we already know the bad state of Europe, the industrialization of Europe, the fact that they are now increasing tax in many countries. They are scared to do that, but they are also limiting their benefits, especially now. They're looking to many other ways of cutting costs. They are in a bad way. Britain, England, already we hear that Britain is trying to sell some of our embassies, all in an effort to cut costs. They are all challenged in ability to raise revenue and limit costs. So we know they are not in a good place. There's limited growth in Europe since in these days of the special military operation. And how is the special military operation going? Anyway, somehow the Russians got really, really angry at Ukrainian successes. Ukraine, we remember yesterday, attacked 2 ships in the Red Sea. But beyond that also, they did something that really made the Russians angry. They've been attacking the Crimea and all the oil facilities in Crimea. In fact, they've destroyed the oil facility that they use in exporting most of Kazakhstan's oil. That Kazakhstan oil that is shipped from the Black Sea port of Novorossiysk, actually 90% of it is Kazakhstani, and it is owned mainly by American, Chevron, I think, Shell, and all these American oil companies. They never touched it. It's not under sanctions, but it was damaged when Ukraine attacked with 2 drones. But the Russians have responded with a very massive attack across different parts of Ukraine, mainly Kyiv. This is a map here of the attack, and we can see that it is all across, extensively, but it was targeted mainly towards Kyiv. And the Russian Ministry of Defense actually put out that Russian forces strike Ukrainian industry and energy sites in retaliatory measures. The goal of the strike were achieved. All the designated targets were hit. Russian forces. So the major cities hit and in this were Kyiv, Lviv, Kharkiv, Odessa, Vinnytsia, and others, with explosions reported as far west as Ivano-Frankivsk. So the Russians put out this very big attack on the Ukrainians, and it was a very massive one. They used Kinzhals, they used mainly hypersonic missiles. In fact, a few days ago, they had attacked one of the main airports that house the suspected to house mainly the fleet, or the F-16 fleet. There was about 5 Kinjal attack on it. Another in the battle, mainly Konstantinovka, they are making advances there. The armed forces of Russia Federation. What I have here is that the armed forces of the Russian Federation have taken control of the industrial zone of the southern part of Konstantinovka near the railway depot. They are moving in and slowly but surely getting to Konstantinovka. So Konstantinovka is is being surrounded. The extension of the central zone up to 600 meters into the urban center of Konstantinovka. I have the maps here of the various movements in within Ukraine there, and in Kharkiv. In Kharkiv also, the armed forces of the Russian Federation have advanced up to 5 kilometers in the direction of Borovaya and are occupying new positions and at the stronghold on the near approaches of the village under enemy fire. So in Pokrovsk, though, we get that new evidence of the advance of Russian troops north of Pokrovsk has appeared. North of Pokrovsk is the part that was just the remaining part close to Menograd. And we now hear that the Menograd section has really been expanded. So it says Russia has changed tactics. Yes, this is it. Five Ukrainian brigades are now besieged in Menograd. Russia is ensuring nothing reaches them. They have enough food, but they are running out of ammunition. This is the encirclement, complete encirclement. As we can see here, the whole of Pokrovsk has been taken completely. These are all Russian formations, Russian regiments, and soldiers here. And then these are the five besieged brigades in Pokrovsk and in Menograd. So the Russians are moving on and getting closer and all that. But let me round up now with what is going on in Venezuela. President Trump has put out a tweet and he said all airlines, pilots, and drug dealers and human traffickers, please consider the airspace above the and surrounding Venezuela to be closed in its entirety. This is now causing a real problem. It gets us to the point where we think that yes, that attack on Venezuela is just imminent. It's a few days away. What form will it take? President Trump has been dropping a lot of hints. He says the CIA has an operation there. So will it be one where rebels will join American special forces to try and overthrow Maduro, or that's a grand operation of some sort? Or will it be just an air attack, as happened with the attack on Libya and in Yugoslavia? So we really don't know what shape and manner, but we know that President Trump has concentrated, one, the largest aircraft carrier in the whole of the world, the USS Ford, and then he has also put some destroyers there. He has put a whole array of military armament and 15,000 troops. What action is going to take is still left to, but he has put so much pressure. We heard that he talked with Maduro and he told him that he should step aside, and if it doesn't step aside, that is going to be the end of his administration. Whatever action he's going to take, we know now that it's getting to be really bad. With the airspace around Venezuela is now avoided. Many countries are beginning to avoid them. Already, some few days ago, we heard about this no-fly zone, sort of like that Trump has imposed. And some major airlines, including Turkish Air, said they were not going to fly again. Maduro now told them that if they don't fly, their licenses will be revoked. But now this threat is becoming very clear. The Venezuelan Ministry of Foreign Affairs says an attack on its airlines will constitute an act of aggression. We categorically and absolutely reject the message published today by President Trump on social media. The U.S. president is attempting to issue orders and threaten the sovereignty of our national airspace, our territory, and our navigational system. You will wonder what they will be able to do. But anyway, President Maduro has told the whole of the Venezuelan Air Force to be very ready to defend their country. Now, we should know that Venezuelan Air Force still has, I think about 40 F-16s, and they've been supplied. As we hear, we don't know how true, with some Russian air defense systems. But however this war is going, it seems like war is coming to Venezuela, and that neighborhood, but we really are worried about the consequences of the war. It's not a war. We should remember that nobody thought of the consequences of Libya and what it is still doing to the Sahel region in Africa now. Nobody thought about the consequences of Iraq and how it destabilized that neighborhood. The consequences of the bombing of Syria, Obama, and how it shaped and had big blowback on Europe today now that we now have extremists, or let's just say far-right parties that are doing very well now in Europe. This is because of the influx of immigration. There are a lot of unintended consequences when these military operations happen. And the Caribbean is fragile. They are tourist-based. They are very weak. Even the countries that are egging them on now don't have. The countries that are supporting these operations, Trinidad and Tobago, they may not know the consequences of what's finally going to happen to them whenever this bombing operation happens. We in Africa, we know. We know what the bombing of Somalia did to Kenya. We know what the bombing of Libya did to West Africa. And those in the Middle East know what the bombing of Syria did to the whole of the Middle East and to Europe. Anyway, this is where I end my video for today. If you're new to my channel, please subscribe. If you have any views regarding opinions I just expressed, please put them in the comment section. Do well to like and share. Until my next video, you have a good day.